So today, Donald Stojack is going to talk with Nick Nalbach. And did I say that correctly? Sometimes when I say Nick, did I say your name right?
Yeah, Nalbach.
Did
I
I
think
nail
you
it?
pretty. I think you pretty well nailed it. A lot of people don't. Nalbach, Nalbach. Like there's a lot of different ways people can pronounce it.
And Nick was introduced me by our good friend Morris. And a couple of weeks ago we had Rob Lawrence kind of open up that conversation about podcasting and stuff. And Nick is kind of one of those how do we say podcasting ninjas. Let's call them. Have anybody ever called you a podcasting ninja? But
I think I'm gonna put that on my signature now.
yeah.
Podcasting ninja. I like that.
Now, how many years? How many decades did you work in corporate exactly?
Pretty much my entire life. It's been what? When did I graduate? Graduated 2015, and pretty much out of that got into corporate and spent a couple years there. Realized I didn't
Mm-hmm.
care for it, and then wanted to do something different. I wanted to build
Mm,
something of my own. I wanted to kind of more determine my worth by what I do, not what others tell me
hmm.
I am worth.
Anybody
So
else
that's what.
resonate with that? Yeah. So, what is the magic of podcasting? Why podcasting? Why can't we just put up a YouTube video or just put up our profile up on Instagram or any number of things?
You know, funny thing is that podcasting was like the plan B. That was like the
Mm,
fallback option because I wanted to do video and I would got everything set up. I knew what I was going to talk about, and then I'd hit record, and then I'd be like, "What was I going to talk about?" It would just like escape me, and it was that thought of just like talking into like the abyss of the camera that terrified me. So my thought was like, okay, I can start a podcast, I can interview people, I can have a conversation, and now it's not 100% on me to talk for 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour. I have another person on the other side that can kind of help carry that conversation a little bit with me. And once I started doing that, I kind of fell in love with the whole process. I thought as a content creator, someone who wants to create content, podcasting is almost like the ultimate form of content, especially if you're filming video because you have audio, you have video, you can turn that into blog posts and written content. So it's like that one piece of content turns into everything you would ever need.
but it's that power of conversation. I know Tony's had me on his podcast here, and that's going to air pretty soon, isn't it, Tony? What is that? Thanksgiving time? That's coming up.
Yeah, it would be the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving.
And as I train a lot of people on sales process and sales conversations like that, Nick as well. And I think people way overthink just about everything. But there is power when one or more people, you can talk into a mirror, but when a couple of people get together and have a conversation, there's something magic about it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? And so you're kind of pulling the magic out through conversation.
And that was something that I didn't realize until I was maybe a year and a half into podcasting. I got into it with the mindset like, this is how I'm going to create content. This is how I'm going to get comfortable. And I realized like I'm having conversations with all of these very successful entrepreneurs. I'm learning a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm talking with people that probably otherwise wouldn't have sat down and had the conversation with me,
Mm-hmm.
but I had something of value to offer them. So now they're willing to have a conversation, and I'm learning in the process selfishly,
Mm-hmm.
but we're also sharing knowledge with everybody else who wants to know this. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like I got like free master classes from all of these successful entrepreneurs just because I had a podcast, and it was like
And
one of
and
the
you've
coolest
talked to some
things.
pretty significant people out there. Who are a few of the top names you would say that you've been able to engage with?
Some of them, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with John Lee Dumas. Um, he's
If he just dropped the name, if you guys don't know that name, that's a good name to know. So write that one down, right? Yeah, big.
Yeah, John Lee Dumas was a big one. Chris Ducker, he
Mhm.
was he was a fun one to chat with. A lot of energy with that guy. he's He loves what he does. You can tell just by talking with him.
And that gives you more credibility when you do that as well, right? It's almost their
Mhm.
credibility transfers to you. And how did you go about getting people like that to talk to?
Some of it was just shooting my shot. And I think that's a lot of things that podcasters kind of get wrong. Not get wrong, but they're afraid to insert themselves or ask the question. I remember Pat Flynn was one that I had been following. Pat Flynn, he did a podcast all about entrepreneurship, interviewing entrepreneurs. Like that's kind of what I
Mhm.
aspired to do. So I was following him for a while and I just put out a tweet and I was like, my goals for the new year are getting Pat Flynn on the podcast, getting this many downloads and something else. And he just happened to see it and he replied and he's like, all right, one off your list, check. Here's my person. Let's get it done. Let's have the interview. And it was like, holy cow. Had I not just tagged him in it, it never would have happened.
So step one, you dared ask the question.
It's always a no unless you ask.
Yeah. And sometimes if first time you get a no, maybe ask again and ask another way, or wait a while. And they might have forgot that you asked and ask again. And pretty soon they're going to go, oh, that name sounds familiar. Right.
Right.
And they don't even realize they've told you no a few times. I mean, seriously, just ask again. Has anybody ever experienced that? Or maybe hit a wall when they're trying to ask? Just ask again. Ask another
Especially with some of
time.
these other people, they're busy people. They might miss it the first time or they might forget.
Mhm.
And then you follow up and it's like, oh, thank you for
Mhm.
reminding me. That slipped my mind.
Yeah. Do you know how many times Janelle has asked me to have coffee with her? More than once. So FYI, and we're finally going to do it next week. Does that make sense? It's like so many people they stop and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't ask again. Ask again. Ask. Take action. Take action. One of the things that got my attention, Nick, with what you're doing with podcasting was some of the artificial intelligence AI tools. Are there, and I know you've got a really good video out there that details some really good cool stuff, and Morris has actually also interviewed you as well. So I mean, if you guys want to search around, there's some really good stuff sitting right here between what Morris does with Create Profit Grow, and then Nick, yours is Next Gen Podcaster.
Yep.
Right. And then is there another website too that they would look at?
Next Gen Podcaster is probably the best,
Okay.
most up to date place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other factor here before we go too far is to realize the blue ocean of this, right? Because sometimes people go, oh my gosh, there's way too much out there, right? But the reality is, what percentage of podcasts are really active and moving, would you say?
So I was working on a presentation and I just went through this. There are about 3 to 4 million podcasts
Which can
out
be
there right now.
intimidating. That's an intimidating number.
It is intimidating. Of those 3 to 4 million, only about 44% have published more than 3 episodes. So there's a lot of podcasts out there that only have 3 episodes and they called it quits after 3 or before 3 even.
Okay.
So now you're down to about 720,000 podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to compare this to something like YouTube. I don't have the exact numbers, but how many like millions or hundreds of millions of YouTube channels are out there right now? It can feel very difficult and intimidating to try to break through on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then you compare that to podcasting, where now you're competing with really less than 1 million serious players in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasting still seems very new and it is growing still. There are more listeners every single year. So that blows my mind. I feel like being almost like an early adopter of podcasting, even though it's been around for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, so I would encourage people, I hear it all the time, email is dead, right? Like, no, it's not, I've worked in the mailing industry as well in the past. People say, well, direct mail is dead. Are you kidding? You want to make some money? Direct mail. You want to make some money? Email. You want to get noticed? It's a podcast, right? What are some just crazy tools that you have found that might be helpful for us here?
I mean, everyone here's probably heard of ChatGPT. I feel like you couldn't step outside without hearing about ChatGPT or going on the
Mhm.
internet without hearing about it.
Mhm.
That one is a huge one. Um,
How are
the
you
the
using? How are you using it though?
so it's become pretty much a daily conversation that I'm having with this AI at this point. A lot of what I'm doing right now is with our YouTube channel. So what I'll do is I'll take the transcript, and you can do this with the podcast as well. I'll take that transcript from the video or podcast, run it into ChatGPT, and then I have it start generating more content for me out of that.
Mm.
So it'll generate blog posts. And mind you, I'm very specific with what I'm asking. I don't just give it a transcript and say, hey, write me a blog post. I'm very detailed with what I want with that blog post.
Can you give us an example of one of those details?
Yeah. So one of the big things that I noticed with ChatGPT is if you were to just go in and say, okay, we're talking about podcasting, write me
Mhm.
a 3,000 word blog post about podcasting. You're going to get some information. You're going to get that blog post, but it's going to be really generic. It's not going to
Mhm.
be unique at all. You might actually notice patterns like there'll be a headline and then one paragraph and then a headline and then one paragraph, and it just doesn't look natural. So one of the things that I actually tell ChatGPT every time to do is first give me that outline. Then after it generates that outline, then I want to write the blog post one section at a time. So I'll take that first heading and say, write this section. And it might give me 1 to 2 paragraphs. It might give me a list in there with some resources and tips. Then when that's done, I go, okay, now let's write section number 2. Let's write that second heading. And then it'll generate more information. And it's a lot more detailed. And what's kind of cool with that is as you're doing that, like say we get to section 2 and we're talking about recording a podcast, I can say, okay, I want you to write section 2, but in this section, I want you to include some tips on what kind of mic to look out for and what kind of software that I want like people to think about using when recording this. And then ChatGPT's like, okay, we're going to talk about recording a podcast. Here's the type of equipment, here's the software, and here's what's important, some important facts about recording your episode. So it gives you that flexibility to also cater that blog post to whatever you actually want to come out of it. That's been one of the biggest game changers. Like, take it section by section. Don't try to get it to
Mhm.
do everything for you at once.
Do you use the free version of ChatGPT or are you using the paid version?
So I am using the paid version.
Why?
And one, there are with the paid version, you get access into the all of the new features, plugins. The plugins are cool. There's some you might be able to find some use out of those. The advanced data analysis tool, it was
Mhm.
previously called Code Interpreter.
Mhm.
That is what would actually allow you to upload documents. So that's where I will take a transcript from my podcast or video and upload it into ChatGPT. And now it's going to go scan that document versus me saying, like, copy paste, here's my transcript. One of the things with ChatGPT and primarily the free version is it can only handle so much context. It only lets you, it only retains so much information. So once you hit a certain point, it either says can't do it, sorry, or it just kind of stops.
Mhm.
With ChatGPT 4, they open up that context window a little bit, but being able to upload that document, that also opens up that context window a little bit. So it's able to like scan more information than if you were to just copy it into the chat. And then on top of that, like I've tested back and forth between the free version and the paid version. And every time I use the free version, I'm just like very let down. I'm not
Mm.
impressed by the answers that I get. So I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
no, we gotta go back to the free or the paid version.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think there's lots of good free tools out there, and you'll probably give us some heads up on some of those too. But with the core, when you're doing stuff, it's if you pay to play, business is about leverage. Let's face it. And are you truly leveraging the tools that you've got, right? And sometimes we short circuit the tools that we've got, or we're using a beta version when the souped up version is right in front of us. I just pay attention here. And I think the advice here, and I would heed it very well, is try it out. What do you got to lose? And you might find major breakthroughs here. Major breakthroughs. Are there some other AI tools that you would recommend, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, if you're still on the fence about ChatGPT Plus, if you're like, no, I'm not going to pay the $20 a month, whatever.
Yeah, $20. That's like a latte and a half now.
Right? Yeah. When I hear people say that, I say, yeah, try it for a month at least.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will try GPT 3.5. That's the free version, and they'll be like, it wasn't that great. And it's like, okay, just at least try 4 before you just completely get rid of ChatGPT. If they're still like, not really sure, Claude AI is a completely free one,
Mhm.
and it is, I'd say it's a little bit lower on like the advancedness of ChatGPT, but it is still extremely powerful. And there are a lot of people right now that are starting to like Claude and how it responds to the questions better than ChatGPT. So I would say that's probably your next closest competitor to what ChatGPT is doing.
Yeah. And Claude is spelled Claude, Claude.ai.
Yes. Um, then for, I know you guys were talking about YouTube. I'm sure a lot of people here have YouTube channels. Potentially, Tony, it sounds like you have a podcast as well.
A few of us
Opus
do here. Yeah.
Opus Clip. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that one. That will essentially take your long form content and chop it up into little viral moments that you can share for TikTok or YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. And it does a pretty good job of pulling out interesting bits, and it'll throw captions on there for you automatically. Like, you don't really have to do anything except upload the video or paste in the YouTube link, and it's like, boom, here are some clips. And that's been, I've used that pretty much for every single one of my YouTube videos right now, just for some kind of way to promote. It's really easy.
Isn't that the one that, like, if you've got it narrow, it'll make it wide, or wide make it narrow? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Yeah,
Is that's Opus, right?
yep.
Yeah.
There are several tools like that. Opus is probably the
Is it
most popular one.
Munch is a,
Yep.
yeah.
Opus Clip and Munch. I would say those are the two front runners. Opus Clip is definitely the cheaper price wise,
Mhm.
but it still generates some
Pretty
pretty
decent
darn good
stuff.
content.
Yeah. You've talked about transcriptions a lot, and I think that's someplace where sometimes we struggle a lot. We'll put something together, and how do we get? Is there some AI that we can use that maybe makes that process a little bit more seamless or more doable?
I'm going to put in the chat right now riverside.fm/transcription. That uses ChatGPT's OpenAI's transcription software, which is incredibly accurate. And it is completely free. You don't need to sign up for an account.
Mhm.
You don't need to do anything. You literally go to that link, drop in your file, and within a couple minutes, you have the TXT file. Or if you want the time codes, it also allows you to download the SRT file. And they're pretty darn accurate. I'm very impressed with all of these paid tools out there. You can get your transcript for free pretty damn quick.
I've been in the game for a while. You can tell with the gray hair at the top of the head, and even just a few years ago, the team hours spent on transcribing things and putting in the time codes and creating the detailed notes and stuff like that. You know, that is happening in moments now. And almost you do it without a team. You're basically, if you're a one person show, you can have a few of these things rolling and turn out incredible stuff. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking beyond the content creation side of things, I've actually used the transcripts from other people's videos and fed that into AI to gain more insight into it.
Oh,
There was a particular creator that I was following who was in a similar space to me, and his videos like constantly going viral on TikTok. I'm like, what is this guy doing? So I pulled transcripts from several videos that he created, fed him into Chat GPT, and basically said, pull out like the points of this video that make it interesting. What kind of things is he talking about in the hook? How is he like engaging the listener throughout the video, and anything else you can find about the videos? And it went through all of these different transcripts and said, in this video, he hooked readers in here. He asked you to take a screenshot here to kind of engage the viewer, and this was his call to action. And it analyzed every single one of those videos, and then I was able to say, okay, now I have kind of like a framework, almost like a script to work off of for my own content. And I just started kind of getting into that. So I want to just start dumping really successful content in there and just kind of see what are the similarities that are happening between these different creators. What are they doing that's the same? And what can I do to kind of add my own twist to all of this, but incorporate these important elements that are being hit on in every video?
so here's a brilliant idea. How about you call it content hacking?
Yeah, I like it.
Right. You know, Russell Brunson's got his funnel hacking, right? How about content hacking? And is that totally ethical?
I'd say it's ethical. I mean,
I absolutely. So, you know, sometimes we get, I know sometimes we get these mental anguish, like, oh my gosh, you know, am I ripping somebody off or something like that? No, you're not. No, you're not, because you're telling it in your voice, right? And you're adding your story. Do you think there's any new stories out there, or is it the same story but with a different character? Right? You familiar? Everybody's here familiar with the hero's journey, right? It's the same story, guys. Different characters, different secret path, right? Different why, but it's the same. It's the same formula. So you're finding those formulas out there. It's totally viable. Content hacking. I get 10% if you take off with this, Nick. Remember, it was my idea.
Right. I'll give you a ring. It's funny. I was listening to a podcast the other day that was kind of talking about this, like drawing influence from other creators, and it was a YouTube editor. He like edits for some pretty decently well-known YouTuber, and how he kind of developed his style, where he just kind of took inspiration from all of these different creators. There were like 5 specific creators that he really enjoyed their videos and how they edited and did all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he took little elements from every single one of them that he liked and started incorporating that. In his mind, all he's doing is basically just stealing from everyone else to kind of create his own video. But he had people coming up to him and be like, hey, I really like your style of editing. He's like, my style? I don't have a style. I'm just borrowing from everyone else. But he developed it into his own style. He didn't realize it because he's just thinking he's stealing from other people, but really
Right.
it is his own style. So I like that idea of being able to borrow from multiple people, see what multiple creators are doing, and not just like, what is that one person doing and how can I copy that one person?
Yeah.
If you have inspiration from like a couple, now it starts to become your own version of what all these other creators are doing.
It starts to become a true synthesis, you know, and ultimately that's what all knowledge is anyway. Right? Nothing is even if you go back to Aristotle, I mean, was he original, or was he leaning on who came before him and responding to it? Right? Eric, you're deep in thought there. It's like in music too. It's like new compositions. What are new compositions, right? New compositions are built on the backs of all the old compositions. They're not built in a vacuum separate from those. You know, once in a while you get a court case with copyright infringement and they go on for a while, but ultimately that's all music is. So why would any other content be any different?
And in the Western world, there's still 12 notes to the octave. Other musical traditions, there are more.
Yeah.
We still have the 12 notes, and people are still creating wonderful things with those 12 notes.
Yeah.
And the other thought I had, Donald, real quickly, what the reason I really went deep into thought is you think about so much of what's present and significant information for us in the personal growth way, in the personal growth world, and think back, many of those ideas came from Marcus Aurelius and Heraclitus and Epictetus, among others, and Socrates and Aristotle, right? I mean, it's not like these weren't created by Tony Robbins and Brendan Burchard, and which is wonderful. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, my youngest son got deep into Aristotle this last year, and he's going deep. He says, "Dad, do you know all this stuff?" And I go, "Well, let me have a conversation with, like, look at all this original stuff." Yeah, there it is, right? One of the a great treasures of online knowledge is called the Gutenberg Project. If you aren't aware of that, I mean, that's like so much. Nick, I don't know if it's all the books that are in the public domain. I mean, when you're talking about content hacking, it'd be incredible to upload one of those books into one of those AI tools and say, "Hey, pull out the best plot in here," and rewrite it with new names on the characters. I mean, right?
Yeah, and I think I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I was actually talking to Morris about this previously. It's really, with all of this AI stuff coming into play, it's becoming more and more important to really hone in on your storytelling skills. Because eventually, everyone starts using the same AI tool to edit their videos, to create the images, whatever. Everyone's stuff is going to start to look the same, which, I mean, we kind of see that anyway. Mr. Beast comes out with a video and he's got his own style, and everyone wants to copy Mr. Beast because he's getting millions of views. AI is just making it easier to do that.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you can control out of all of that is that narrative, is that story. You might be saying the same stuff. Me and Donald could be telling the same story, but we're going to tell it differently. And maybe half the group here resonates with how I'm telling it. Half the group is going to resonate with how Donald's telling it. But it's all in the story. I'm just now kind of coming to that realization as AI tools are becoming way more prevalent.
So they are just tools. They're not going to replace anything. I think sometimes, remember when TVs came out, Richard? We're old enough to and we thought, they're going to take over the world. They're going to take over our homes, right? Remember that? I mean, it's like, seriously, in the late 50s, early 60s, I mean, people like up in arms. Oh my gosh, TVs.
I know the first TV I watched was how big? About that big, a little,
right?
Little green screen.
Little green screen, and we were happy with that. And they're going to take over the world, right?
You're making me feel old, man.
Right, and then you remember when videotapes came out? Right? Was that in the 80s? It's like, oh my gosh, the movie theater is going to be a thing of the past. Like, really? No, they just upped their prices. What did they do? And movie theaters now have outlasted Blockbuster. Come on, right?
This is way older than us, but radio created quite a stir in the 20s, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm not that old. Maybe you are. I got to give Richard a bad time, but because what, you got 2 years on me?
I'm 68. How old are you?
I'm not that old.
You're not going to tell. You're 3 years younger than me, I think.
I'm applying for Medicaid this year, so you.
I know what that means. Yeah,
it's like that. Yeah. So the tools are there, but the story is really crucial, right? And I think, Nick, ultimately in your story, it's pulling out, why are you doing this? I mean, like for you, you're trying to leap out of corporate because you found that ladder was up against the wrong wall. That's a big part of your why. And that comes through in all that you do. Tony got tired of taking people's fingerprints, working with law enforcement. Eric got tired of listening to the trombones, right? If you're in the orchestra, so we're kind of classical musicians. If you're in an orchestra, do you know which instrument you don't like unless you are a trombonist? It's the trombones. right? They're obnoxious. Agreed, Eric?
Well,
mean-
yes, but when you're in the back row where percussion is, it's the French horns because they're pointed
the
right
French
at
horns,
you.
yeah. And they're
And that
always
sound,
they're always spitting on everybody.
spitting and yeah.
Yeah. So there's always something. Does that make sense? And so that's kind of what you're looking for. Why are you trying to go from here to there? Right?
Mhm.
Why are you going down that new secret path? And who's going to come behind you that you're going to lead and guide? You become Yoda. Look for your Luke Skywalker.
And you know that it's interesting that you say that, because that makes me think about I always had a hard time like putting out information, because I
Mhm.
always thought that I had to think of the information that people aren't talking about. I had to come up with something totally new and recreate the wheel, if you will. And like there are so many people that don't know what you know and are looking for that information. And
Mhm.
because you're so focused on trying to come up with something that no one's ever thought about, you're not helping the people that are like, where's this information? I need this information. Who can help me? And you
Mhm.
already know it.
Yeah.
So thinking about it like that as well, like you know something that other people don't know that they would want to know. Like don't
And even
take
if
that
they
away.
know it, Nick, it's taking action. And so it's not just knowing the knowledge. And so sometimes people will have acquired the knowledge other places, but they sit on it. And so it's finally taking an action. It's finally, paying attention to what you buy at the supermarket, so that when you actually cook your own meals, that you've got a balanced, array of nutrients on your plate. Finally, we all know it. Come on, right? Does anybody not know that? It's actually doing it, right?
And in some instances, I would say how that information, like you said, you might know it, you might have learned that before, but it might not have stuck for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And one person saying it a specific way might just like all of a sudden the light bulb comes on and it clicks together.
Mhm.
You've had that information the entire time, but like now it makes sense. Now I
Yeah.
understand
Well,
what
they're
that
good.
person was trying to tell me, that stuff I
And we're
learned.
sitting here today talking about podcasts. And so we've heard it. We're all entrepreneurs. Are we doing it? Or are we doing it as good as we could? Or if we are doing it, are we seeking to do it better? And doing it better is not necessarily learning some new fancy thing. Sometimes it's just going back and doing the basics and doubling down on the basics. The best musicians start every day going back to the same scales. I was so shocked when I was in college and took jazz improvisation. And you know what the instructor had me do for weeks? Play the same damn scales that I learned in second grade. And I paid really good money for that. And I says, wait a minute. He says, well, there you go.
And the key element, Donald, was to play the scales starting on a note in the middle of the scale and going up to scale instead of starting on the first note of the scale.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the golden bit.
Yeah, starting a C major scale on E. Oh, I remember that day. So any of you, if you're not musicians, okay, that's a really big deal. That's like standing on your head. It's like, okay, here we go. Nick, is there anything else that we haven't kind of uncovered here today that maybe is part of the magic mojo that you kind of that stuff that you like to make sure that everybody knows?
I mean, I would say one of the biggest impacts that podcasting specifically had for me were the relationships and the networks that I was able to build as a result of it. I can tell you right now that I wouldn't be sitting here in this room talking with you guys right now had I not built the relationships that I had built and made the connections that I made that came through podcasting.
Mhm.
It really opened the door. And one of the questions that I like to ask a lot of the guests that I had on the show was like, what is the thing that you would attribute your success to? Or another way that I would put it is like, what is your superpower? And a lot of the guests that we had on that show talked about relationship building, networking, connecting with new people. And that was kind of like a oh crap moment, because they're all basically saying, I wouldn't be where I was had I not been connected or met this person.
Yeah.
Or this person was the one that kind of brought me on the scene and allowed me to get to this point. So don't think about podcasting as just like a way to necessarily market or make a revenue or an income. Think about it as a way to build connections with people, meet new people. It can be your whole excuse of having a podcast is like, I want to talk to experts in this industry or talk to these people, and you can make that happen. And I think it's those relationships that you build that are going to unlock new opportunities and new potential for you.
Yeah. A lot of the big shift that I do when I'm working on a project or working with clients, and again, my genre is sales and marketing, is so many people are thinking about generating leads and either converting those leads or not, right? Typical business 101. Should you focus on that? Yeah. But what's more valuable than that is not generating leads, it's generating relationships. Your net work will equal your net worth. Focus on building your network. Tony.
There it is. Couldn't hit the unmute button. So one of the things that I've found having a podcast, well, first off, I totally agree with Nick. I mean, contacts all over the world. I mean, I was just recording a Christmas episode for my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and the person that I'm talking to is in Bali. I'm here in New York State, so we're 12 hours difference.
Yeah.
So it's my like 9 o'clock at night, and then she's up at 9 in the morning, and we're having this conversation. So that's the coolest thing. But the other thing I just wanted to bring up is, in having a podcast, a YouTube channel, whatever you have, take your regular business card. So this is like my what my regular card looks like, but on the back of it, all I simply have is right there. It's the podcast. Check out Strive to Thrive, Purposely Positive Podcast, and something like found where your favorite on your favorite podcast app. So what I'll do is I'll have a conversation with somebody. I'll meet, hotel lobby, at a restaurant, even the waitress. Hey, do you listen to podcasts? And if they say yeah, I go, hey, check out mine, and my email is on the back. I said, send me an email, let me know what you think. I'd love to have your feedback. And people are very receptive to that. And it's also a good way for you to give them your business card. So it's a good way to make connections.
Yeah, very good. And you notice Tony just plugged his podcast right here. See how easy that was? And it's just like people overthink it. It's just like, right? And don't be afraid to ask. It's right there.
Well, my podcast is only good as Nick will contest the guests that I have. I do a few solo episodes, but my guests are what make it.
Well, there's a lot of research that shows that, like, when you get a dialogue going, the engagement level goes up in multiples. All right, so you always have the talking head type of a process. Imagine a bobblehead just kind of going. After a while, all that people see is a bobblehead. But when you have a conversation, right? This is, and in music, it's the difference between Gregorian chant and polyphony. When Bach came along, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it just took that line and it went 100x, right? So if your conversations can go multiples just by having a conversation with somebody, don't be the expert. Be the expert at having conversations. Be the expert at drawing the expert out of other people. That's a good idea. That's another good idea, Nick. If you run with that, I get 10%, right? So I'm up to 20% now, right?
Yeah.
Anything else that we want to ask Nick while we got him in front of us? Was this helpful for you guys today?
How about the little elephant in the room? How do you monetize it?
Ask for their credit card.
Ah,
That's how you mon. Yes. How do you audit? I'll tell you how you mon. Nick, how do you monetize anything? Ask for some money. Hey, if you want to, if you want the the magic juice I'm talking about here, you click here. If you want the whatever.
well, isn't podcasting about getting advertising? No.
I, I'm gonna say, if you want to make money, no. And the reason I'm gonna say that is because there are tons of podcasters out there that don't have like Joe Rogan kind of following. If you can get Joe Rogan kind of numbers, by all means, advertising and sponsorships, that is going to be your bread and butter because they're going to pay you a ton of money to get on your show. But for the vast majority of podcasters, that's just not realistic. So sponsors are going to pay you very little for that 30-second ad snippet. One of the things that I like to think about and talk with other podcasters about is, if you have a podcast, you likely don't just have a podcast. Don't think of your podcast and the content you're creating as a podcast episode. Think of it like a media agency, a media company. You're posting to YouTube, you're posting on Apple, Spotify, all of those platforms. You're likely posting on all of these social media platforms as well. How valuable would it be if you created content, if someone paid you and you created content for them and you plastered it across every platform that you're posting content to? That company could do that as well. And they're going to, one, have to create the content, two, have to pay all of the platforms to advertise on every single one of those platforms and spend a ton of money to do it. When, like, I mean, that's probably tens of thousands of dollars that they're pumping into it. They could pay you a couple $1,000s to create a couple pieces of content for them and share it on your your channels. That's a hell of a deal for them. And you're going to make a lot more than if you were just put a 30-second ad spot on your podcast. I like to think about brand deals and not just sponsorship opportunities.
That makes sense, Richard.
Oops, sorry. Having a hard time wrapping my head around that. I must be. So you're, I guess I'm just not getting it. People are paying you to do things on your podcast, or you got relationships with people that somehow.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it starts with a conversation with a specific brand. So, as an example, an email marketing software company that I use, I started having a conversation with them. They wanted content. That's what all these companies want, is they want content. They want stuff out, and they don't have the time to make it all. So we had a conversation and we kind of negotiated what platforms it was going to be and all of that. But I essentially made content for them. I made 4 like 60-second videos, and that was it. And they paid me a decent amount of money just to make those 4 little easy videos. And now we've built a relationship. So now that can evolve into even more than that. I can pitch them a bigger package that's, hey, I'm going to give you a 30-second ad spot on the podcast. But then I'm also going to put your logo on my YouTube video when I publish that. And I'm also going to shout you guys out on the social media clips when I promote this podcast episode. You're giving them access to every single social channel that they would have to pay a lot of money to get access to. Does that help make a little more sense?
Well, it's sort of like advertising, kind of, isn't that?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it definitely is advertising. But I think where most people kind of get stuck is they're like, I need a sponsor for my podcast.
So basically, you're giving people, you're selling access in a way. You're selling access, is what you're saying.
Yep. You have an audience that they want to tap into, and they pay a lot of money to get in front of that audience.
How big is your audience?
My audience is not that big.
Hmm.
I have just over 1,000 followers on Instagram. And that first deal that I made with ConvertKit, I had less than 1,000 followers on Instagram when I made it.
Cool.
So it's, companies are willing to pay the money because they don't want to do it themselves. That's what it comes down to. You have that ability. All of you are here. You're creative. You create things. People will pay you for that.
Now you created a 60-second video for somebody. And what do you do with that? You put it at the front of your podcast, the end of it, or altogether independently, you just publish it for them?
So I published the video itself to my Instagram account, to my TikTok account, and really TikTok I think I have less than 500 followers there. And then you can throw in a little snippet into the podcast episode. A lot of the podcast platforms now, they give you an option where you can just upload a document or upload a audio file, and it will automatically put that in the episode for you, whether that's at the beginning of the episode or at the end. You just, here's the audio file, load it in, and then when the episode plays, the listener on the end is going to hear that ad first.
And what platform do you use to do your podcasting?
That's through Buzzsprout. They're the ones that push it out.
Buzzsprout?
Yes.
Buzzsprout?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat here. That's the platform that makes sure that it gets to Apple and Spotify and Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. They're the ones that make sure it gets to those platforms.
That's the portal.
Fascinating, Captain.
It's kind of interesting too out there in the world. We're finding there's much more power from micro influencers than the big influencers. Although you talked about the Joe Rogans. I mean, it's actually the people that have the smaller followings that they're much closer to their audience. It's interaction. And, there's crazy money to be made there.
Absolutely.
Morris, take us home. We're almost out of time.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that conversation because Nick and we've been friends for several years now. And one thing Nick always does for me is he shows me tools that I didn't know existed. And it's like, I do something, it takes me the whole week. And then Nick is like, why don't you use this tool? And now I can do the same thing in a day or half a day. And that's been our relationship pretty much since the very beginning. And 2 weeks ago, I think, Nick, I was in their first Next Gen podcaster call. And I mean, he just showed me all the AI tools to create content in a fraction of the time than what it took me to create it before.
Yeah.
And it's just, that stuff just blows my mind. So it's not right, like learning these skills to create more content more efficiently, better using these tools. That's another thing that allows you to make these brand deals. Because before, it took someone to do that an entire week, right? They can't be profitable like that. But someone like Nick, they can get better quality with better research in less time because he's putting in the time to learn all these tools. And then he tells us about it, I guess.
And I mean, that's a key phrase right there. Take your time learning how to use better tools. Take your time learning how to use better tools. Right? Remember when they invented the wheel, Richard? You and I were around for that, right? Remember those square things they were trying to roll down the roads, and all of a sudden said, hey, let's make this into a circle and it'll work better. See, better tools get you better results, but then you've got to become a master of the tools. What's that? Let me just keep on top of it. Nick, thank you very much. This was a great conversation back and forth. I really encourage people to check out his Next Gen Podcaster. There's lots of resources there and just incredible stuff. Sabine, did you have you just like to put up that hand and applause? That's an applause hand. Okay. You're not in the library today. So remote Sabine. We're going to give you a remote Sabine name here. Very good. Okay, my friends, till next week. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you
Yep.
all. Pleasure
Take
to
care,
meet you guys,
everybody.
and thanks for having me.
Yep.
It's a blast.
Bye.